Hello, and thank you for joining Precise Perkle here to go over the Part 2 questions from the Blue Regents, June 2014. So, we are taking a look at number 25 to start. It says, draw the graph of y equals the square root of x minus 1. At this point, the only clue I'm going to give you is that you must make a table of values. So use your resources, use your tools, make a table. I always suggest that you include at least 7 values in your table, any values you want. Plot every point you can, and don't forget to label. Go ahead. Number 26. The breakdown of a sample of a chemical compound is represented by the function P of t, where P of t represents the number of milligrams of the substance, and t represents the time in years. In the function P of t, explain what 0.5 and 300 represent. What I would do is probably put this into y equals. So P of t, remember, stands for y. And instead of using the letter t over here, you'll input the letter x. So why don't you take a moment, input this, go to your graph, and see what function does this model. Go ahead. Now, once you take a look at the graph, and if you use the keyword that was over here, I hope that you've noticed that this is really an exponential decay function. Okay, where your graph should look something like this in your calculator. They want us to describe what 0.5 and 300 represent. So last week we reviewed the exponential equation. Do you remember it? It was y equals a times b to the x. So this is a very, very important equation we must remember for our regents. Remember that a stands for the first term, or the starting amount, and b stands for the common ratio, which means the number that we are multiplying by over and over again. So when you look here, I want you to think about what 300 is taking the place of and what it means. Please do not say that it means the first term. Give me an example of what 300 means according to the scenario in question number 26. And 0.5 is your common ratio. We do know it is decay. So when we're talking about growth or decay, remember B really equals 1 plus or minus the percent as a decimal. In this case, we are talking about decay, so it will be 1 minus the percent as a decimal. So I want you to think about, what did we have to subtract from 1 in order to get 0.5? And think. So then, what does 0.5 represent? Go ahead. Number 27. Given this inequality, determine the largest integer value of a when x equals -1. We've seen the word integer pop up a few times so far in our Regents practice, and you need to recall that an integer is a positive or negative whole number. So we must know our definition for an integer. So given this inequality, they are telling us that x is -1. So what I'm going to do is plug in -1 everywhere I see x. So x is here, x will go here, and I'll rewrite the rest. And now I'm going to plug in that -1. I'm going to evaluate, you are going to evaluate on your own what you can. So simplify some of our terms, do what you can, bring things down. And then your goal here is to isolate the a variable. When you are done, you'll end up with a, some sort of inequality sign, and some number over here. Make sure you always go back and reread, and it says to determine the largest integer value of a. So somewhere after your inequality, you must state the largest integer value of a is blank. Go ahead. All right, 28. This one looks familiar. The vertex of a parabola represented by f of x equals x squared minus 4x plus 3. And it has coordinates 2, -1. Find the coordinates of the vertex of the parabola defined by g of x, which equals f of x minus 2 in the inside. Explain how you arrived at your answer. If you're looking for some help with this one, you can look back in the last lesson that we did. It was I believe it was lesson number 23, and it was on the last page. That's all the help you're getting on this one. Go ahead. Number 29, on the set of axes below, draw the graph of this equation. If you see a question like this, you should be very, very happy and thank whoever made up this question, because all you need to do is graph this. So remember, you must make a table of values, record them. It's so nice of them that they also gave it to you in y equals form, where y is already by itself. So I hope you're thinking of what you need to do here. Plug it in very carefully. Remember, fractions, we always use parentheses. And copy your table very carefully and plot every single point that fits on the graph. And don't forget to label. Go ahead. 30. The function f has a domain of 1, 3, 5, and 7, and a range of the set of numbers 2, 4, and 6. Could f be represented by? And they give you a list of ordered pairs here. So we need to remember the definition of a function, which says each input, and you may want to add this to your fact sheet, each input, remember those are your x values, can have only one output, which is your y values. So if this is your domain, and this is your range, so these are your only inputs, and these are the only outputs you could use. Did they use the domain for the x values? And did the range of values come from the set of range values up here? Also, does it satisfy this definition that each input has only one output? So you are going to either state, yes, it could be represented by that because, or you are going to say, no, f cannot be represented by that because. Go ahead. 31. Factor the expression completely. We've seen this once again. This is one of our first few facts from our fact sheet. We must think about what it means to factor completely. Ask yourself, is there a GCF? Is it AC? Or is it dotable? Dots. I hope you see which one it is. Don't be afraid of those exponents. Just follow the same rules that we usually follow when we are factoring. And don't forget to factor more than once. Go ahead. 32. Robin collected data on the number of hours she watched television on Sunday through Thursday nights for a period of 3 weeks. The data are shown in the table below. Using an appropriate scale on the number line below, construct a box plot for the 15 values. Remember, in order to make a box plot, you need your 5-number summary, which includes the minimum. You need to find Q1, the median, Q3, and the maximum. In order to get full credit for this question, you must write down these 5 numbers. That's considered showing your work and where your numbers are coming from. Remember, you can do this in your calculator, so I'm going to talk you through the steps and remind you of them. You're going to go to Stat, then Edit, and you're going to enter in these 15 numbers right up here, all into L1. Once you have done that, then you're going to go to Stat, Calc, and 1var Stats. Hit Enter until your data comes up. Scroll all the way down, and your 5-number summary should come up. Copy them exactly as they are. You'll want to decide how to number your number line. Think about what's the lowest number I need to go to, and what's the highest number, and how can I go by a nice scale so that all of my data fits. So mark up your scale, and then create your box plot. Go ahead. Number 33. Write an equation that defines m of x as a trinomial where m of x equals this. So this question is really just telling you to do what you can with this equation up here. The first thing I notice is that there are 2 parentheses next to each other, so I'm going to double distribute very carefully, just the 2 of these. Okay, distribute the 3x, and then distribute the -1. After you've done that, you'll want to bring down the 4x squared plus 19. I want you to see, after all of that, can you combine anything? Can you simplify? Are there like terms? Is my equation in standard form, where the highest exponent comes first and my constant is at the end. And that should be your new equation. The test makers were very kind enough to tell you that you should end up with a trinomial. So go ahead. Okay, once you have your equation, the next part says to solve for x when m of x equals 0. So you're going to take this equation you have up here, and you're going to make m of x now 0. Okay, you'll have your equation here, and I want you to think about, what type of equation is this? How do I solve for x? How do I show my work and solve for x? Because this is a part 2 question. How many answers should I get? Go ahead. Number 34, I'm going to skip for now because we will be doing this one in class, so don't worry about that one. And let's take a look at 35. Caitlin has a movie rental card worth $175. After she rents the first movie, the card's value is $172.25. After she rents the second movie, its value is $169.50. And after she rents the third movie, the card is worth $166.75. Assuming the pattern continues, so there should be a pattern we need to come up with, write an equation to define A of n, which is the amount of money on the rental card after n rentals. So I'm just going to record my data up here, and she had 175. Then after the first movie, she had 172.25 left. Then she had 169.50. And then she had 166.75. I want you to think if you could find the pattern up here and see how it's decreasing. And I'll give you a hint, it should be subtracting something over and over again. If you're subtracting something over and over again, what sort of sequence does this model? And I hope that you're thinking of an arithmetic sequence, which states, and I'm getting this from my reference sheet, a sub 1 plus n minus 1 times d. I want you to create this equation and just make it so you're using the symbols that they wanted. So I'm going to do it like this instead. And you should be replacing a sub 1 with something. You are going to keep the n minus 1 and replace the d with something. Okay, so think about what those values are that need to go here and here. Go ahead. So if Caitlin rents a movie every Friday night, how many weeks in a row can she afford to rent a movie using her rental card only? Explain how you arrived at your answer. So she's going to do it every Friday night. She'll rent a movie. So this is 1 Friday night. This is 2 Friday nights. This is her 3rd Friday night. You can keep going and map it out since you do have plenty of work down here. Okay? And see how many movies can she get or rent until she has spent all of her money. If you see a quicker way, you may go with that also. Don't forget that the question says to explain, so you must save some space to write in words how you arrived at your answer. It is not enough to just show your work. Go ahead. 36. An animal shelter spends $2.35 per day to care for each cat and $5.50 per day to care for each dog. Pat noticed that the shelter spent $89.50 caring for cats and dogs on Wednesday. Write an equation. Write an equation to represent the possible numbers of cats and dogs that could have been at the shelter on Wednesday. Right now I'm thinking that I'm going to use the letter C for cat and the letter D for the number of dogs. So I'm going to put this in here. Okay, because we do not know this information. And at this point, you got to remember, if you have 2 variables that you do not know what they represent, you must eventually be able to come up with 2 equations in order to solve. So this question here is just asking you to come up with 1 equation according to the scenario that they gave you up here. So go ahead and come up with that 1 equation. Then Pat said that there might have been 8 cats and 14 dogs at the shelter on Wednesday. Are Pat's numbers possible? So I want you to see if he had 8 cats and 14 dogs, How would you know or how would you find if these numbers are possible? I want you to think about the total amount of money that the shelter had spent. Is it possible? They're giving you a hint to use your equation, and don't forget to justify. Remember, you're not going to be given lines to write your answer to, but you need to know, somewhere down below, you must write your explanation. Go ahead. All right, number 37. A company is considering building a manufacturing plant. They determine the weekly production cost at site A to be. A of x equals 3x squared. While the production cost at site B is B of x equals 8x plus 3, where x represents the number of products in hundreds, and A of x and B of x are the production costs in hundreds of dollars. Graph the production cost functions on the set of axes below and label them Site A and Site B. What I would do over here is make a table of values for A of x. Again, anytime we are graphing, please make a table. And on the opposite side, I would make a table for B of x. Okay, so you can use your calculator to guide you along for that. Plot your points and not just the ones you listed in the table. You want to make sure you plot every point that fits. Don't forget, they reminded you that you must label which one is Site A and which one is Site B. When you are done, there are a couple of questions you need to answer. Okay, they're not down here. Let me go to the next page. And use your graph to answer these very carefully. So the next one says to state the positive value of x for which the production costs at the two sites are equal. So look at your graph. When do the two sites cost the same amount? And explain how you determined your answer. So again, we must write something there describing that. Lastly, if the company plans on manufacturing 200 products per week, which site should they use? Again, we must justify our answer. So you're on your own. Make sure you answer each piece and do your explaining and justifying, and then you're all done. Go ahead.